Thank you, David. That was fantastic. I paid him to do that. Thank you, Dave. No, I didn't pay him to do that. That's very kind. So yeah, this is the Oscar Showcase. We have some of the filmmakers with us tonight in the room, actually. Usually I'm not, yeah, right over there, I see you. I haven't forgotten about you. Some are here now, and some will be here in about 45 minutes when the show concludes, in 55 minutes. You know, the reason for creating the Oscar Showcase Tour 18 years ago was because we've all seen the Oscars, and we have all seen the red carpet. And unless you're a Pixar or Disney animator, you're probably not going to get much attention on the red carpet. But there's nothing like presenting to our peers, because we all know about how hard it is to make animation. And to make exemplary animation that gets Academy Award nomination or wins the Oscar is pretty big. And you know the suffering these people went through to get where they are. And you can appreciate it, and you can respect it, and you may like their films, and I presume you will. And it's a chance for the filmmakers. In this case, we have 3 young men from France who are 3 of 6 directors who directed the film Garden Party. And we'll have the director and producer of Negative Space. And at least, I believe, at least one of the directors of the film Revolting Rhymes. There are 3 directors. Unfortunately, 2 of them were in they're okay. I'm just going to start out by saying they're okay. But they were actually in a double Uber accident yesterday where one hit the other and T-boned it, and it appears as though they're probably, the cars are totaled, and they survived it, but not without a few aches and pains, so they might be taking it easy tonight. So anyhow, it's nice for them to be able to come from foreign places or local places to be with their peers and to discover that we're kind of a community in a very important way, that we kind of speak the same language and we care about excellence in storytelling and artistry and filmmaking, and it's just nice to be with these people. So after the screening, we'll have this Q&A, and we encourage you to stick around. But let me just have them stand. These are the directors. We have Gabriel, and we have Florian, and we have Lucas. Thank you, gentlemen. And let me tell you, just keep this in the back of your mind, especially for those animation students here from UCLA or anywhere else. Garden Party was a student film. There are basically 6 credits on that film, and maybe a composer or something like that, sound design in the school, but for the most part, these 6 guys made the entire film by themselves. And I think you're going to be impressed. So anyhow, let's start the program, and we'll see you in about 50 minutes. Enjoy. Thank you. Half the folks responsible for Garden Party, Gabe, and Vincent, and Florian.
Yes, nice.
So let's bring up the director and producer of Tiny Inventions film studio, the Negative Space. Come on, Rue. Where's Edwina? You have a seat in the middle there. This is Rue, the director. Edwina's the producer from France. So these young gentlemen are from France as well. And then let's bring up the filmmakers of Revolting Rhymes. We have Bin Ha right here. And Jan and Jacob, the directors of the films. Uh-oh.
Sorry for that.
Okay, let's not lose you any more than necessary. Are you okay?
Yeah. I'm sorry for that.
Are you all right? Good. Okay, look at this. We're all together up on a big stage. This is nice. Not standing. So, do we have any questions for these wonderful people? They're all wonderful, by the way. I've had the privilege of spending a lot of time with them. And there are microphones, so if you raise your hand, somebody will bring you a mic. Oh, yes, we prefer that you use a mic because we're actually recording this for hopefully posterity. And is that okay? If we have a problem being recorded.
Okay, so Revolting Rhymes is right there, and then Negative Space is right here, and then Garden Party. All three were awesome. Garden Party, fantastic visuals. What program were you using?
Thanks very much. It's Maya, Arnold, ZBrush, Houdini. We had the chance in school to have access to a vast variety of different software because it was a student's license. So basically we use everything we could. Yeah.
That was awesome. And awesome accent too.
Thanks. Thanks.
So Negative Space, that like the funeral scene, just like how, just that end joke. Who made that joke? The one where is all that empty space.
So it's based on a 150-word poem by Ron Corgi, who lives in Pasadena, and I never thought it was a joke.
Really?
Yes. And it's been interesting because every screening, the reaction is different, but mostly in the US, it ends with a laugh, but in Europe, it's more silent, sometimes laugh. Really, I've had some dead silent screenings, but I never thought it was a joke.
I laughed. I thought it was hilarious. Okay, now Revolting Rhymes, how did that, like, who wrote the story for the entire thing? Who wrote the screenplay or book or whatever?
So it's based on a collection of poems by Roald Dahl, and those are separate poems. So one for Snow White, one for Little Red Riding Hood, and so on, Three Little Pigs. And we sat down and conjoined them all into one, hopefully one cohesive story. So yeah, it's every bit of rhyme that you hear is Roald Dahl. And in terms of the larger story, there's some writing from us going on.
It was a cohesive story. It was perfect.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I was very entertained. It was awesome.
Okay. We're going to move one person at a time over with the microphone.
Sounds good.
So we'll let this gentleman go, and then we'll get you next.
Cool.
Miss.
I guess a question for all the filmmakers, if you can tell me about your biggest challenge in making your film, if there's something that stuck out. Thanks.
Who wants to start? Me? It actually was the writing. It's weird. It was sort of 4 or 5 months of writing without writing any actual dialogue, because the dialogue's all in the book. But then in terms of getting a relationship between these two girls, getting a relationship between the narrator wolf and Little Riding and all of that, that was script writing without writing dialogue. So anything emotional that happens between these characters is usually without words, because there are no words in the book, because these people never meet in the book. And that was fairly complex, sort of jumping between the stories, connecting them, and then trying to, get emotional story arcs without adding dialogue, was probably the toughest thing, I would think. What do you guys think? Yeah? Good. That's us.
For Negative Space, so this film was made in France with Icky Films and Manuel Com Studio. And because of the funding reasons, we had 4 different locations in the 9 months production. So we had to pack all our sets and move multiple times. So I think that was the biggest challenge, to deassemble, assemble, set up the studio, and not waste any bubble wrap.
Where were the 4 locations?
It started in Vendôme at Cyclic Animation Center, and then we moved to Orbigny, where Icky Films is, and then went to Manuel Com Studio, a little bit outside of Paris for shooting bigger sets, and then we returned to cyclic animation in Vendôme again.
Why four locations? Couldn't you not shoot it in one location?
I mean, it's very complicated. Do we want to explain?
It's mainly for funding reasons.
Oh, for funding.
Yeah.
So different regions of France?
Yeah, because we get finance from a region, so we have to work in that region, and we get fund in La Région Centre and fund in Paris, and also we wanted to work with Manuel Cam, and they are in Paris because I mean there aren't that many studios where they know how to make stop motion.
Fantastic. Yeah, I was just curious.
Yes, so to us, well, as our subject, frogs and toads, are very quiet animals, it was complicated to make the film, well, they don't do too many action, so it was complicated to make the film dynamic because they don't move too much, and we cannot make them talk, we cannot make them... So we try to fix it with some editing, some sound effect, yes, to make the film more, put action in the film.
Yeah, and there was three different story of frogs and one story of the background with a crime scene with all the clue, and we had over 100 iteration of the animatic to get the right rhythm, and actually we expected the short to be much more shorter, and it ended up being 7 minutes. So we had to render all of these frames, and it was like up to 5 hours per images, per frame. So it took a long time. And I think the biggest challenge on the film that all the frogs were amateur. So it was so-so for the...
Okay, you had a question.
Hi. Oh, sorry. My question is for Negative Space. My question is, has Ron Cortegi seen the film? And if he has, what do you think of it?
When we finished the film, we sent him the link, the first person to send the link to, and he never responded. And we got really nervous. And then 6 months later, so when we started to get awards at film festivals, he started to comment on Facebook. Like, oh, this is fantastic, that's my poem. So we're like, what's going on? So we contacted him again, and he had a great response. I still don't know why he didn't respond to us for 6 months, but it was really great. Last month, we came to Los Angeles for Annie's Award and Oscar's luncheon, and we met up with them and did like a 3-part interview series. And we asked him a lot of questions about how he made the film, how he wrote the poem, and what he thought about the film. And he was really happy. He was thrilled that something that he wrote in a day turned into a film. And it was something that he didn't imagine what it would be like. And so he's happy, and that made us really happy too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Another question, please. Yes, this lady here, 3 rows back.
Oh, there's a mic on that. She'll get it to you.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering, there's such a mass amount of things you guys could have chosen to make as films. How do you, and how did you, boil it down to these particular projects? How did they come into your life, and why did you choose them?
I think it's might be hard to answer for everybody, but the project we did evolved a lot through the years. It's only finished when you finish it. At the beginning, we were mainly interested to work with animals because we thought that it was great for animation to have silence characters. Yeah, we watched a lot of documentaries, and we wanted to do stories with a bit of a polar side, so we made that.
I think finding the right project is a little bit like finding your love. So for us, we're developing multiple projects. We usually do develop 3 or 4 projects at the same time. It's kind of like, dating like multiple people and figuring out who you like the most. And then all of a sudden, like, you find this gem, and then you just completely fall in love, and you can't explain why. And the rest of the things is just like, it's trash. So that's what happened with Negative Space. We read the poem, and it was an immediate fall in love moment, and we couldn't imagine doing anything else but that film.
Well, for us it was a bit similar, but like the initial, like, how do you say, impulse came from our producers who got the rights for the book, like to make an adaptation. And we had worked with them before on other films. And when we read Revolting Rhymes for the first time, it also was love at first sight, I would say. And of course, working on a Roald Dahl, Quentin Blake book is also very, like, we felt very honored to have that possibility. That was really nice.
Great. Well, thank you for that question. Somebody else? Yes, over here.
I just want to know what your reactions were when you found out you were nominated, especially with somebody like Glenn Keane, the same category.
Our reaction? I mean, it starts with that short list. You kind of get prepared. First you're on a short list, and then you, maybe, and then you look at all the others that are also on the short list, and it's like, like this year, I think it was really hard. We couldn't tell like who. Like, they were all very good projects, and then obviously the day where they announced the nominations, we were all on that live stream and just watching. And then if it happens, of course, it's really nice that when your name shows up there. And yeah, but both of us, we were nominated once before, so it wasn't a complete new thing for us, but it's still very thrilling, and we're happy.
I think regarding the long list and the short list, just because you mentioned Glenn and sort of being nominated alongside him, to me the more sort of humbling and daunting thing is you read through the long list, for example, and you've been touring festivals with your film for a while, and there are some films that you utterly love, and then they don't proceed to the shortlist or something like that, and that's really, for me, that's the weird experience. I sort of tend to, it adds a certain, it's quite unreal, the whole experience, even here, but that is something, because you go through these stages with your peers. Those guys I hadn't met before, but you go through festivals and you see each other's films for a year, and then suddenly there's only us left, and it's thrilling, but it's a very unreal thing, and I'm very happy for Glenn, but I'm really sad for some other films who didn't make it.
Yeah, once you realize you finished these films, it was such a long time ago that we finished these films, and after that, it's like releasing your kid into the world, and then something happens there, but the influence that you have on it is kind of limited. So there's a lot of luck involved in how far these films go. So I was super happy, but also it was, as Jacob said, with other films that weren't nominated, it was a very humbling experience and feeling.
For me, first, I was just really surprised, because I wasn't expecting, and I was really proud of the team because everybody poured so much love and energy into the film. But then as the days went on, like, I was getting so many emails and phone calls and just pouring amount of love and support, and I realized the impact of this, and that I was representing Asian filmmaking communities, minority female communities, women in animation communities. Japanese community went pretty crazy, and then the stop motion community. And it made me really proud because when I take each community, I'm always representing the minority, the underdog. And so that made me really, really happy. And I was so happy with the amount of support I received. And it's not just about this film, but it's like my past 15 years of doing animation. So many people had helped, and that was like a moment to realize that.
We are a really small production company. It's our the fourth animated short film we produce. So it's kind of amazing. We didn't really expect it to be nominated, and we were just really surprised and really happy. And we know there are really big names, and we're next to Pixar and Disney, but we're here. We're so small, and we're here. So it's just amazingly. Yeah, we're amazingly proud and happy.
Well, of course, when you work on a project like this, you work so much on it. So we was you kind of locked in a room for 1 year, so you don't really know what will be the audience reaction to it. Actually, we didn't really know if the audience was gonna like it. So of course, this nomination is the biggest reward we can have.
It was our graduation movie. At the beginning, the goal was only to be able to have a job after that. So unexpected and great.
It went very much farther than what we could expect.
Do we have any more questions? Apparently we did. We'll get you next up.
Hi, great job for everybody, very much so. The negative space was interesting, the ending, as you said, because there was so much pathos, obviously, and the fact that this young man had never really connected with his dad, and he's walking up to this casket. And it is confusing with the laughter, why there is laughter. And the only thing, it's confusing, I think, only in the sense that it is a container that has yet to be filled completely, and yet you have the double meaning that he never connected with his dad, a lot of empty space there. So it is interesting to see how that ended. I'm just curious, with all of the different styles of animation that we have to choose from, 2D, CGI, stop, and everything, how did you arrive at a stylistic choice to tell your stories?
So negative space is, it's all about the objects and the clothes that gets packed into the suitcase. And we made a choice to portray the characters a little bit more rigid because the relationship is distant and cold. And in contrast, the clothings are more lively and alive because that's where the memory is embedded. And we thought that we needed to show the textures as much as possible. And then, so in a way, it was a no-brainer, like it needed to be stop motion. We couldn't have done it in CG, or we would have spent so much time trying to get the real material when we can just do stop motion and get that. So it was a simple decision.
Realism was the best choice because we really wanted to show those frogs with their the way they look at things was what was interesting for us.
So it was all CGI, or what? I still am a little confused as to what. Was there any real components in that at all? It was all. It was so realistic looking. You chose to make it extraordinarily realistic.
Thanks. There is a little bit of dust that has been shooting, but everything is CGI otherwise.
Dust.
Dust. That's a tough one, too.
Just raises the bar for a lot of people. You got a question? Yes. Let's get you a mic.
I'm happy that you guys are all up here because I mean, your films were incredibly different, but they all had a bit of a dark undertone, or at least one aspect of them did. And that's not something that I generally expect from animated films. And I wonder who your audience is, because it might not necessarily be a children's audience, as you would, at least as a sort of quintessentially animated film might be. So, or do you think about your audience when you create a story like this?
So for us, it was difficult because the previous films that we'd done they were not CG, and they were headed for a family audience, which is more sort of classically animated, more classic audience for animated subject of that length. With this one, it was weird because we read the book and we didn't know the book before. We knew all of Roald Dahl's books. We grew up with them, but this one had never been translated into German. We're all German. So when we grew up with Dahl, that book never came, we never sort of came across it. And then we read it, and it is pretty, there's, you saw the film. So to be honest, the first, the way that you get to these jobs is always a writing assignment. So our producer, who we both worked with, or all of worked with before, had sent us the book, and then the first question is, okay, here's the book, what do you want to make with it? Feature, 6 short films, 2 short films, whatever. And you start writing, and I always, and I think that also goes for you if I remember correctly, when we wrote it, we were always like, okay, this is a job, but this thing will never get made because the BBC is involved, as you saw in the credits, and there are shootings and what have you. But at the same time, it has a deeply humanistic sort of undertone with the girls and their sort of their story, and also the narrator and his sort of the spirit of setting these tales right. So the book balances the. Sorry, I'm sort of rambling, but the book balances the darkness and at the core quite a big heart, and so we tried to do the same. But we were actually surprised when we handed in the script, and they were like, "Yeah, let's do it." And then once you do the storyboarding, you're really careful how you portray the more sort of the darker moments. That happens a lot in the storyboards, how you stage them, how you time them. So because we still have a kids audience, because it's Roald Dahl, in Britain especially, kids will watch.
I think for us, with commercial jobs, there's always target age is so necessary. It's one of the first things to discuss about. But for short films, we just tend to make whatever we want to because there's no client and no limitation. I think Negative Space was never meant specifically for kids. And some of the children's film festivals have said, oh, it's a little too dark for kids. But personally, it's not specifically for kids, but it's not specifically for adults because you can be 1 or 2 year old and lose a parent or lose somebody you love. And if you live, you have death. So I think I also don't want to say this is not for kids, and I want kids to see it too because they also have their interpretation, and it would be cool to hear what they think about the film.
And thanks for the question. For us, we, as Rose say, we didn't also think very much about the audience. We realized since we left the school and we started the collective that there is an audience for kids, family and adults. But at the time, it was just about making the short we wanted to do. As well, no client, so it was a lot of freedom and it was nice.
Thank you. I hope you all win.
First 5 tie ever for the Oscars. All right. Well, I see 3 hands. Let's stick with those last 3 questions, okay? So why don't we start over here, and the 2 of you will be next, okay, in the red shirt.
Hi. I'm an animation student here at UCLA. So getting to see these films was absolutely fantastic. Pretty much everybody in our department got to look at them, and we were all just really blown away. And part of the process that I wanted to know about was how much, if at all, the storyboarding process factored into your films, and how long or short that was, how challenging it was. I know for Revolting Rhymes, you were mentioning it, but I was wondering if for Garden Party, you used storyboards, or if you just had shots in mind that you wanted to do.
As I said, there was a lot of iteration of the quiz. What we wanted to do when we have an idea in mind and we are brainstorming together, all the six, discussing about idea, we try to very, very quickly put it in a storyboard, but even more, we try to do animatic, so to get an idea of the rhythm, to add the sound effects, and basically we try to have a very, very rough version of the final movies as soon as possible, because once you start to get with the version, you can try new things, change the edit, add new shots, take off some of them. And yeah, I think it really helped a lot to do these works. Yeah.
Anybody else want to touch that one? Okay. Next question. Oh, yeah.
Hello. So I kind of have a different question for each group, so I hope that's all right. So what I want to ask Revolting Rhymes is, I really like the style you guys had for the film. It, you had a lot of extreme poses and expressions and that kind of stuff, and also this nice touch of like. It's sort of clay-like with the flashback, but in the present day, they have more realistic texture. And so I guess what I want to ask you guys is what sort of technical challenges did you come across with that? For Negative Space...
why don't we do one at a time, if that's okay?
I'm sorry.
So technically... because you said technically this is not so interesting because it's Maya and it's the challenge here was that when you talk about the extreme poses and stuff like that the book is illustrated by a man called Quentin Blake. Some of you might know he's done all of Roald Dahl's books, and he does pretty extreme poses and he does wonderful character designs. And he's as much a hero of ours as Roald Dahl was. And that was the challenge. You have this book and you have these illustrations. You don't want to copy them. You can't copy him because he's a genius. But you somehow want to honor his work. And so what we did was, as you said, his line work and stuff like that, we sort of put aside because you can't copy it. But in terms of his shapes, in terms of his volumes, in terms of his shape language, and in terms of his poses, that was a big inspiration. So when you go through the book, the major illustrations in the book, you actually find in the film the same poses, the same composition. But besides that also, that was a bit nerdy of us to do that, but even beyond that, Quentin Blake was a big inspiration for the wilder stuff, wilder than in our previous films. That was because of Quentin.
For Negative Space, I am actually familiar with the work of Tiny Inventions, which the director hails from. I noticed that specific company utilized a variety of differing techniques, from stop motion to motion graphics, to CG, to that kind of stuff. With Negative Space, I could tell there was a lot of stop motion, but I wasn't quite sure whether or not there was some CG assistance or not. So.
So you want to know the little secret?
Yes, I do.
All right. So there's only one shot that we had to do CG, which was the tunnel scene, when the main character is driving through the tunnel, because we couldn't build a tunnel that the animator could go in to animate. So we had to do green screen, and then we built the tunnel in CG. And there's actually 2 shots where the eyebrows are CG, because we had originally wanted to draw the eyebrows, just like the pupils. And then after 2 shots, we said, no, I should be volume. So we added the eyebrows, and we had to come back and figure it out how to do the CG. So those are the 2 things that we had CG, and nobody has found out which shots are the CG eyebrows so far.
Well, I couldn't tell, so clearly you succeeded.
Thank you.
This is a challenge for the next screening.
Which eyebrows?
So for Garden Party, I want to say, with the reveal of the murder victim in the pool, I was horrified, but I was kind of laughing at the same time. just the juxtaposition of this rotting corpse with this jazz music that's playing. And so how did you guys manage to, balance that? How did you manage to, like, you know, you kind of were balancing this fun-loving party with this horrifying murder that took place, you know?
Well, actually, this part of the film was the first part we have in mind. So since the beginning, we know that at the end of the film, we will add this dead corpse in the pool. So our work during the production was to know how do we get to this. So we had to work on all the story that happened before until this ending. And so yes, we put a funny music because we like dark humor, and we didn't want this ending to be sad. At the contrary, we wanted it to be very joyful, and this is also why the film is called Garden Party. You know, like it's a party depending of the point of view you are.
All right, well,
Naturally.
Thank you, all of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
We
you.
have one final question.
Hello. My question's for Revolting Rhymes. I really like how you did such a good job creating such a fractured fairy tale and had a very different take on everything. But one thing did stand out to me as extremely traditional with fairy tales. Why is Snow White blonde?
I didn't hear that. That was traditional to you, that she was blonde?
Yeah, the blonde pretty princess. It's very
No,
and Snow White is.
we got a lot of flack for her being blonde because obviously she's supposed to be dark-haired in the fairy tale. Quentin drew her blonde. It's that simple. So we had this thing that we said, okay, if you go back to the, is this? Did I misunderstand? So we had this thing that when we go back to when a reader goes back from the film to the book, we said there should not be a contradiction. So for some reason, Quentin Blake, the illustrator, in the book, Snow White is blonde, and we had major discussions with our main storyboard artist, who in the storyboards always gave her black hair, and we were like, dude, and he was like, no, I mean, that's Snow White, she's gonna have black hair. You know? And we're like, we don't care. We never, the point that you raised, I never considered, I have to say, that it sort of has to do with blonde princesses. I never saw that. For me, it was completely like it's a character, because Dahl doesn't treat her as a princess very much, so she's a character that you take seriously, and whether she's blonde or black, I couldn't care less. It's just that Quentin made her blonde, the fairy tales make her black-haired, and I went for Quentin and as a character designer. But it didn't strike me as something that is traditional, because we got a lot of discussions about it. People said it's non-traditional because traditionally she's black-haired. Does that make sense? You don't look like it makes sense to you.
Not convinced.
Because I've had very different experiences and
tell us about it.
observations. Okay. Well, usually the pretty girl is usually depicted as a blonde. You see Alice in Wonderland, Sleeping Beauty, Rapunzel,
No, I know,
Cinderella.
I know, but there is an actual, in the fairy tale of Snow White, there is, she is mentioned in the text
Yeah,
as
exactly.
dark-haired.
She's the one.
So she is the black-haired one, and don't have that association, to be honest. I understand what you're saying, but I don't have the association that making a character fair-haired or dark-haired, that was not a discussion we had, because we have a dark-haired character. There's also, you don't want to have two dark-haired characters, to be honest, just because of that's just craftsmanship of just being able to separate them quickly, visually. So I hear what you're saying, but this was in sort of all the discussions that we had. We never had the discussion of we can't make her blonde because there is too many blonde girls in fairy tales. We didn't have that.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think it should not go without mentioning that we really, truly appreciate the UCLA Animation Workshop for supporting, having us here tonight, and Celia Mercer, Doug Ward, Chuck Sheets, and the fabulous theater staff who presented the film, and all of these marvelous filmmakers for being here. Thank you very much.
Can we give a shout out?
And the audience, of course.
Can we give a shout out to Ron Diamond, whose alma mater this is here?
Yeah, this is where I went to
So thank you, Ron, for having shown.
Thank you so much, Ron. And thanks for coming.
Thank you all for
very
coming.
much. And of course, of ASIFA Hollywood and to Women in Animation for supporting and promoting this event. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Yes, Rue's pointing to the ground because she actually has some puppets from her production, as well as props and such, and she's happy to open up her special little case and share them for you to take a look at up close and personal. Please, that'd be great, Rue. Thank you.